Hi there. Literally 30 minutes. Good to see you.
We all in construction.
Yes.
If we can go ahead and take our seats, we will get ready to go here. Before Quentin, are we okay with number of people in the room?
We're going to do one more head count.
All right. Said it'd be good if everybody in the room was seated, then we know you can be in the room. We cover a couple of things that we did last time before we get into the meeting. Restrooms are outside to the right. There's a ladies' room and a men's room. If for any reason we need to leave this room suddenly, either because we're not getting along well or something else should happen, we would go down the steps, we would go out the front door, and we would move to the left down the hill. Hopefully we won't need to do that. We're limited to, I think, 45 people in this room by the fire code. We're going to abide by that very strictly. We do have the same overflow rooms, a conference room down the hall to the left, as well as one downstairs. To the left, we are also streaming it to Culpeper and Lynchburg. Again, by video conference, we're doing the live streaming again. And once again, we'll have the podcast available after the meeting. And just to remind the public, we are doing our business in the public view, but this is not a public meeting, so we won't be taking public comment. And we ask you to, just like you did last time, just be as quiet as possible so that everybody's voice is picked up over the audio. We rearranged some of the microphones, so hopefully the people that are viewing by live streaming, and we'll talk about them in a minute, will be able to hear a little bit better than they did last time. Before we get started, like for the benefit of those people that are here, as well as folks that are watching us, we'll do some introductions again, particularly because we do have a couple of alternates here at this meeting that weren't part of the panel the last time. And let's go ahead and start on this side of the room this time with introductions. And while we're waiting on Kristen, Fred, why don't you go ahead and do it?
Fred Shanks, I represent the Danville City Council.
Trip Pollard, I'm with the Southern Environmental Law Center.
Turner Perro, member of council for Lynchburg City.
Ed Craigill, Lynchburg Chamber.
Stephen Hooser, Mayor, City of Charlottesville.
I'm Christina Hoffman, and I'm with the Charlottesville-Albemarle Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Hal Duggan, Warrenton Town Council.
Jane Dittmar with the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors.
Yes, and Ms. Dittmar will need to take care of some official business because of the members of the board that are here.
I just need to call our to order our board that adjourned yesterday to this meeting.
Thank you.
Jim Boyd with the town of Culpeper.
Jim is sitting in for Mayor Coleman, who had a death in his family and couldn't be here today. So thank you, Jim. Susan Maines is going to take notes again. And while I may be standing in front of her from time to time, and I'll apologize for that in advance, we thought it was important that she take notes. I do want to mention one thing. Susan's not here just as a note taker. Susan's a project manager. She's a senior environmental scientist with Michael Baker Jr. Incorporated. She's an important part of the evaluation team. And Susan, we appreciate everything you're doing to still sit here and be willing to take the notes for us. Kristen, we did a quick round of introductions, but
And I apologize for
no
being
problem.
late.
No problem. As part of the review of public comments, I want to let you know that the last time we met, 681 people watched it as we streamed it live while the meeting was taking place. 602 of those folks are in Virginia, so that's no real surprise. But in addition to one of our members of the audience that was in Tennessee, I can tell you that 12 people in California watched for some reason, 4 in New York, and 3 in England. In Virginia, it's no surprise that most of those people, 265, were here in Charlottesville, 191 in Richmond, 26 in Lynchburg, 15 in Front Royal, 13 in Alexandria, and then a bunch of single digits. As of this morning, 385 people had watched the podcast, so about 400 people, which it means a lot of people viewed after the meeting, or each of you watched it about 4 times. 40 times, I guess that would be, wouldn't it? I know I didn't watch it 385 times. So the point there is that VDOT, through its use of technology, is really setting some unprecedented levels of public access to what is very much public business. And I think that's pretty cool. As far as comments submitted on the website, if you've gone to that webpage, route29solutions.org, there's a form for the public to share their views or comments. As of yesterday, VDOT had gotten 113 comments. You're not going to be surprised to know that most of those are build bypass, don't build bypass. About 50 of the 113 expressed specific support for places 29, 35 continued support for the bypass. But then the other comments, folks are either through listening, being here, or watching, making some comments on the solutions we talked about. People express support for the median, throughway, or expressway. There's also some support for transit service roads. So folks are participating. Before I go any further, and I forgot this last time, I do want to introduce 3 other folks. Ms. Allison DeTonk is here again. She's the Commonwealth Transportation Board representative from the Culpeper District. Quentin Elliott is the Deputy Chief Commissioner. I said 3, there'll be 4. Ben Manell is leading our technical team, and Ben's been a busy young man over the last couple weeks. And Chris Arabia is here from the Department of Rail and Public Transportation. Last time, you'll recall, Kevin Page was here. If you look at the notebook that was placed in front of you, the VDOT folks kind of collected some of the information you've gotten over the last couple weeks. There is an agenda for today behind the first, whatever color sheet of paper, that first sheet of paper. The agenda is there. What follows from that is material that I've sent you over the last couple of weeks, from the latest material you got to the earliest, including our old agenda. To review just a bit, last time we worked on developing success factors and initial solutions. We came up with 25 success factors that we kind of scrunched down into 6 general categories. We came up with 20 solutions that we scrunched into 9 initial solutions, as well as the thought of perhaps holding some funds for a study of 29, the entire 29 corridor. And what we were going to do today is we're going to look, some of you had some feedback, Tripp had the most feedback on some of the wording of the success factors and the solutions. But what we decided to do for today is we're going to look at them as we categorize them and sent to you. We're going to look at the 9 solutions that we categorized from the 20 that you developed on the 27th. kind of going to look at those in a little bit, not quite yet, Ken, on a blank screen. And then we're going to look at how the technical team evaluated those initial solutions. And I think that looking at those, reviewing the metrics, reviewing the alternatives, looking at the initial evaluation first, and then getting into our discussion will be the most productive. We could look at all the success factors and we can word and reword and revise. We could do the same thing with the solutions. But my sense after looking at what the technical team had done and spending time here with them yesterday, I think the general outcome of their work would be the same. So if that's okay with you, we'll look at a matrix that doesn't have anything filled in yet. And there's a reason I cheated just a smidge. I didn't send you the matrix filled in last night after meeting with the technical team because it would have unloaded a lot of judgment on you right from the get-go that may or may not have been productive. So I tried to find a nice way of saying a couple of times in the note I sent you last night that we would do that today. I do want you to know, and it'll become apparent, that Ben and his crew have been have put a lot of thought and effort into this. Well, I guess that's not hurting us right up there in the corner, is it? What are we watching up there, Ken? It's like one of the overflow rooms. These success factor metrics are a tiny bit different than the notes I sent you for this reason. We had combined these first three kind of into one. We had something like, does the solution improve local traffic mobility and improve through traffic mobility and address the worst congested locations in the Route 29 corridor? Something to that effect. And from looking at the work of the technical team, yesterday, well, I guess the evening before yesterday, it became apparent that it might be good to explode those into three specific categories. So we have, does the solution improve local traffic mobility on the Route 29 corridor? Does the solution improve through traffic mobility on the 29 corridor? And does the solution address the worst congestion locations on the 29 corridor? With the exception of exploding that one into those three, these are as you develop. The top are the categorization of the solutions. Alternative modes, bypass, the median throughway, recall we had a low build, high build, parallel roads, low and high, widen Route 29, an eastern connector, rail improvements, and park and ride improvements. So that's how things laid out on this evaluation matrix. And if you'll recall from what we sent earlier, the success factors have been worded in a way that you can answer yes or no. Now, you know, that's a bit of a judgment call. You can do high, medium, low. You can scale things from 1 to 5. You can do a lot of different things. I can tell you, speaking personally for me, I understand yes or no as a starting point. As a starting point. Doesn't mean there's not more subjective discussion that needs to take place, but what I asked the technical team to do was answer these questions yes or no for now. Ken, can we scroll down just a little bit? We also have for each of the solutions the general length of the alternative, an implementation timeframe to give us an idea of whether or not it fits in this 4-year window. Yes, Kristen?
I'm sure I'm not the only one who looked at the conceptual solutions next to our solutions and found conceptual solutions where there were pieces of them that we really thought were positive and other pieces that were either unacceptable or more questionable. And yet this just looks at them as complete bundles. Is there a way that we're going to at some point kind of parse that out?
We can certainly do that as part of the evaluation, once you see these filled in.
Does that sort of happen outside this room without our participation?
Well, you mean outside of what we did here and what you've got
Combining
sent
of
to you?
Yeah, the combining of them into like this low-build, medium thing and the low-build parallel roads and the high-build parallel roads, and what went into each of those. There were a bunch of different things in each of them.
Right. Would you like to go through all those?
Not now, if it
Okay.
slows things down, but I'm just wondering, will there be a place at which we can say, no, this isn't.
Absolutely,
something more-
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I just think that's all right. I just think if we see this and see where it brought us, will help us with all that discussion.
And also just the technical thing, if that goes on full screen, it might be easier to see.
Let me just say that we spent a lot of time
Yeah,
on
there
this.
is-
There's a whole lot of ways to do it. And it probably would be easier, but you're going to have this in front of you.
Good.
You're going to have this in front of you, okay? The length, the implementation time frame, a planning level cost estimate, which is a number and a bunch of zeros. And that's about as good as we can get right now. Although some events folks can get that down to the last dollar, we'll just look at the zeros. And then, of course, the point of all of it was to see which solutions potentially met the success factors or didn't, which ones might have but were kind of out of reach for some reason. Either they took too long or they cost too much, and which ones we want to move forward into the next round of evaluation. Now, before we show the next one and before I hand this out, we've reached some conclusions about which ones should move forward. We've not poured cement around those. I think it's important to narrow things down, but I also don't think we ought to get in any arguments or get ugly over it, because it's not like we have 300 solutions and you want to evaluate 283 of them. I mean, we've got a pretty good group here. I think it is important to narrow down, if we can, to this next level of screening, which is going to fold in a lot of other factors that we'll talk about later. Of these that we looked at, and of the initial, Ken, if you want to pop that other one back up, or I tell you what, just leave that up. Just leave that up. Just leave that up. Well, no, because that means nobody else can see. That's not quite fair. Why don't you go ahead and put the other one up. Put the other one that's filled in. Yeah. Yeah. I'll cut to the bottom line, then we can open up for the discussion. But from the evaluation that the technical team did, we didn't end up with anything in the second category, but ended up with three that fell into the category of addresses success factors and is available for consideration. 2, we noted that they're already partially funded in the current 6-year improvement program, and I think that will be important for discussion later. As I mentioned, these yeses and nos are relative to our charge that we got from the Secretary, which was to improve through traffic, Route 29 Charlottesville corridor, without disrupting local traffic, and overall reducing congestion. We can take it from here however you, as the panel, would like to take it. We can talk about the yeses and nos. We can talk about the success factors and the solutions. We can talk about the conclusions that were reached, however you would like to take it. But I believe if we focus our meeting today on this, then in a couple of hours, we can be at a point to look at our technical team and give them some direction for the next technical assignment. Now, I'll say, and then I'll be quiet, there's no effort here to make anybody happy. There's certainly no effort here to upset anybody, and I presume some people might be kind of happy and some people might be a little bit upset. But this is an evaluation based on some objective metrics, but some professional judgment for where we sit at this particular time in the study. I thought last meeting was, frankly, met higher expectations than I had set for us, and that says a lot for the 10 of you. So we've got a pretty tough charge here that people have been kicking around for 30-some years. We're here at a point where we've got the opportunity to walk into a room about 30 days from now and make a recommendation. So whatever magic we had in the room 2 weeks ago, if we can hang on to as much of that as possible, I think we'll do okay. I'm Kristen.
I'm sorry, one more technical question.
Absolutely.
We have staff and various people trying to watch this online, and they've said that this resolution is so poor that they can't read it. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
I don't know. I don't know if there is.
Can it get posted on the website?
Oh, it'll absolutely be posted on the
Can it
website.
be posted?
I'm sure we can post it on the website now.
That would be very helpful.
Yes. Ben, can we, who can figure that out? If we can get it in the right person's hands, we will work to post it on the website. Thank you.
Technical kind of question. What, the two that you have, note 1, is partially funded in the current plan, were those ranked at all, or did you just, because they were in partially funded, not rank them?
We didn't rank them because they were partially funded in the 6-year plan. We can talk about, to the extent that they're funded, and what funding would be required to move them forward. The Widen Route 29 project, for example, is to the north of the project area. It was put in the 6-year plan with the presumption of the bypass being present. Without the bypass, to make that piece work, cost about another $18 million. So we've got information like that on hand. We can rank them, we can evaluate them moving forward. That is up for our discussion. The reason we did not rank them was because they were partially funded in the 6-year.
It seems that if they're only partially funded, then the amount of funding that would be taken to complete them would be a good thing to have here.
The amount of money that would be taken to complete them, we can give you.
That was in the.
Some of it was in the fact.
Yes.
Some of it was in the fact pack, but I don't believe all of it was for the parallel load build. Yeah, I don't believe.
And some are not within the 3-year.
Yeah, let me make a comment about that. 2 of them are above $200 million. In my judgment, if you look at the potential advantages of them. They offer some advantages that are worth consideration. They are also projects that can be, they are concepts that can be scaled. So there are concepts that could move forward substantially within the next 4 years and be scaled to fit within the budget, or the Commonwealth Transportation Board may choose to fund them above the $200 million. So try to do a reasonable job of applying judgment and not presuming what the Commonwealth Transportation Board may or may not choose to do. So why they're there. What I didn't want to do was screw around with the cost number just to make it fit some. Well, whenever we know it's posted, maybe we could just let us know. How do you want to start? Or should I call on people? Or are we okay?
Can you go through one more time,
Christine?
like Ms. Sakos mentioned, and just say what each of these encompasses?
Yes, you know what, I can go you one better. I just happen to have here. It's a handy dandy little paper clip. Ben, make sure I say this right. Here is a description of the solutions as they're listed under their main heading with what they include. If you look, I should have saved one of those for myself, shouldn't I?
Here.
Did you?
Coming back. Here's one right here.
Here, I got it. For example, if you look at medium throughway low build concept, you'll see a paragraph that addresses what's included in there. And we've tried to roll in things that could be included with any solution, or where it was appropriate to include something like opportunities for express bus service. Well, that doesn't just hang with one alternative. That could be included with anything. Access management, that doesn't just belong to one alternative. That can be included with other alternatives.
Question.
Yes, Fred.
On the low build medium thoroughfare, are you, does that, it mentions eliminate left turns at intersections. Is that all left turns? Or,
Did we look at all left turns then?
The low build concept, we did not eliminate left turns at Hydraulic, Greenbrier, Branchlands, Rio, Hilton Heights, and Airport. But for the other ones, all of them were.
And is there a traffic signalization piece that came up several times during our initial meeting, but I don't see it here?
There was, the traffic signalization we built in to
So it's assumed in all of them?
to all of them,
So that's a given.
Yes.
yes. And that's also included in your planning level cost estimate. Where additional pieces were included as part of the package, they're included in the planning, the best cost estimate we can produce at the time.
So how many things like that are included across the board? So you have signalization is in each of these. What about access management? As you
Well,
mentioned, that could go to these, but-
access management is something the department is required to do to control access at any facility.
Right, but there's certainly more you could not do with more or less money going forward.
There's more you could do going forward, that's
So I'm
true.
just,
That's true.
but so that's not in any of these. In additional access management is not. Signalization is in each of these cost.
Signalization is in the application of, access management is not in the sense that you just mentioned. Access management as a required policy
Right.
going forward
Is in everything.
is in everything.
I'm in.
Yes, okay.
Going beyond that and the retrofit and going retroactively,
Retroactive application of access management policies
which is, as you know, can be very costly.
is not, yes,
So that's not in.
yes. You're correct, it is not.
Should have been, if you could just take a moment to talk about the ones which least has threes, this five, and,
The three that have three,
other than ones. Five of those.
So the 3 threes and
out of the ones, there are four ones, 3 threes,
We're gonna go to the ones,
forget about the ones.
for the time being.
Yes, okay. That's what we would do. Do you want to review the ones that have threes?
Yeah, I'd like to see.
Yes. Okay.
there's another hand here, maybe.
Related to the same question, since two of the threes are very similar in project costs, could we go in detail comparing those two?
The medium thoroughfare, high build, and the parallel roads, high build?
Just kind of compare the two as far as the project scope.
We could,
I mean, I know there's a summary here. It would be
right.
more helpful, I think, to discuss if that's possible.
Well, let me just ask this, is there any reason we would leave out the other three in that discussion?
I was looking just at the three threes, and there are two of those three threes that are very similar in project costs.
What's your,
I'd rather look at all, because it may be that what we're looking toward is maybe one with a lower project cost and one of the note 1 completions or something like that, so.
well, let me ask you this. Let me just ask you this, and if you don't want to answer it now, that's okay. But what do you think about the ones?
The rail improvements, I think, as it notes, would make a big difference as far as getting people through and lowering congestion. I'm not sure why it's not available.
The rail improvements are greater than 6 years, and depending on the passenger side and the freight side, the costs go from 200 to 700 million.
Passenger side that came up with just adding another train from Lynchburg to DC was one that seemed like it wouldn't necessarily take 6 years or be that expensive.
That was one of the
Okay.
ones I wanted to ask about in the one
Okay.
basket, is that basket lumps together freight and passenger, and my understanding of both the cost and time frame is very different, what it would take on those
Yeah.
two to make a difference.
Mhm.
The passenger rail, I think is well within the 6-year time frame and much lower cost, even at 200 million, to get at least the second train to Lynchburg. I think the other thing that I'm very surprised is that passenger rail gets a no on minimizing environmental, community, and business impacts because it's existing rail. There's no, it's my understanding, no additional capacity projects are needed to get that second train to Lynchburg. So I'm surprised that one. Part of it, I'm just wondering, is because
Okay,
of the
well,
one from the freight rail, which
okay.
is a lot more.
So let's get some questions down now. Let's ask about rail,
Passenger rail.
passenger rail.
I have a question about passenger rail also. Okay. If that was, what's the actual impact that that would have? If we could define that somehow. Because if only I think, Jane, you had said that you'd seen a report that 15% of the traffic was actually through traffic. I think you said that in the last, I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
we all, didn't you?
Yeah, it's-
Okay.
Yes.
There are a variety of opinions on what that number is. I feel pretty comfortable with my 15%.
Okay, so then, so the question is, out of that 15%, how many of that's riding rail, and is that a measurable impact to the through traffic and mobility in Charlotte?
Yeah, I'll give you my answer, it'll be a no. It'll be a no. It won't really meet the sharp charge of this panel. I'm not saying it's not a good thing to do by any means, but I don't believe it would substantially address the first three, the first four.
And I won't belabor it after this, but I think that the reason for trying to deal with congestion on 29, which rail obviously isn't going to do significantly, is really a means to get to the solution of giving people south of Charlottesville a way to get north of Charlottesville quickly. And rail would do that. So it would have the same effect, it just wouldn't actually have an impact on the road itself. But as far as mobility of people going south to north and north to south, it would offer something that is fast and easy.
And I think at least 3 of your no's would fall out if you broke out passenger and freight.
I don't think they would, but we might
I'm not saying you're
disagree on
top.
that. Yeah, okay.
I'm
Okay.
saying environmental impact.
Okay. Let's
Budget and time constraint.
let's put rail up. Like I said, we don't have to get, at this stage today, we don't have to,
Well, I think
Let's come back to this.
I think we need the number of the likely capacity, but I do think that we lose something. Your question was, how do we feel about the ones? I think if we
Right.
accept that as one and lump passenger and freight rail together, we lose something.
okay. Then we don't have to do that.
But I think we can do it
Okay.
fairly cheaply.
How do others have a feeling on that, or? Okay. But let's get some numbers. We'll talk about what our next step is going to be here in terms of evaluation. What about any of the other ones? Then we'll get back to Fred's three. Go
No,
ahead.
this is about one.
Okay.
Am I reading the data correctly, provided the fact that the parking rides are not well used at this time?
The parking rides, what I got out of the fact sheet was they're not well used, but don't provide a lot either. I think there were fewer than 30 spaces. I think there were fewer than 30 spaces. They don't have any disabled space parking. They don't have any bike accommodations, and they're largely private lots, I think.
If it were in tandem with an express bus service, it might be a good question.
Yeah, the parking ride, we talked about this a bit yesterday. There's a lot you can do with park and ride with anything. There's a lot you can do with park and ride, whether we're here having a meeting or not. To me, from a transportation professional point of view, there seems to be more opportunities to maximize park and ride here than what we've currently done. But that could be for a variety of reasons. Available land, like I said, most of these, if not maybe all but one, I think, are located on private property. A church is one example. So park and rides as a standalone solution to meet our charge probably don't get it. To talk about park and ride in combination with other solutions is certainly something we can do.
I guess we can include park and ride as any solution almost.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So maybe we make a note of that, and whatever we carry forward, then we carry that possibility with it.
Or make it part of the express bus service package.
Make it part of it. Okay, we can do that. So the park and rides, whatever we do end up carrying forward, will include park and ride opportunities as part of it. Fair enough? Okay.
I'd like to understand the one east connection. Can you explain a little bit how you arrived there?
The Eastern Connector. Ben?
The Eastern Connector, the issues that we had with it primarily were that it's going to have a lot of environmental impact. It's it's going potentially on the southern end where it ties into Free Bridge, it has to navigate through 3 parks. There's a lot of residential impacts as well. We felt that the need to do the environmental work on that potentially pushed it outside of our available window. The other issue that we looked at is when we looked at the analysis, the diversion of traffic from the worst congested part of the 29 corridor didn't really occur. It actually pulled more traffic off of John Warner Parkway and Park Street in those 2 sections. So,
Thank you.
Ken, am I correct in that while we had this up, people watching aren't able to see the interaction panel?
Going back where they can see.
Okay, so they can, okay, good, sorry. Mayor, did that address, okay? So let's go through the 3s.
One more question. before you get
Yes, sir, ma'am.
Can Ben explain the same thing for the first alternative?
Yes, Ben, for the first?
yes, but that one, we looked at it in terms of the right-of-way does exist there. It would need to be a parking ride lot structure towards the corridor to accommodate the BRT service. The BRT service itself would have a fairly high implementation cost. It was $100 million or more. And then we also looked at modeling the transit trips that were forecast to use that service, and it was roughly 500 a day.
Thank you.
And how did Bus Rapid Transit get on this list? Because it didn't come up in our initial meeting.
It did. It was,
Yes.
it was one of the,
It was the first recommended solution.
The express bus system service was, but also Bus Rapid Transit was? Okay,
Yes.
it wasn't in my notes.
Can I ask one question? I just am wondering how widening Route 29 from, Polo Grounds out to Hollymead wouldn't improve mobility. I'm wondering how you came to that.
How it would?
How it wouldn't, I mean, with the
How it
no.
would?
Yeah. I'm just surprised by that.
we
Well, go ahead, Ben. We talked about
looked at it and we said, it's a good project, but it doesn't necessarily meet our success factors that we find in terms of addressing mobility on the northern end of the corridor. However, the worst crash locations, the highest congestion is actually occurring on the southern end.
Yeah, but that's the third question. I mean, there are definitely backups at Forest Lakes. I've sat in them. There are 3 questions up there, and I just feel like the third, yeah, I would agree with you. The worst areas are earlier on. But the first 2 questions are kind of generally in that corridor, and I still thought that was within the corridor we were looking at.
I actually highlighted those 2 grades that our technical experts gave as ends and thought maybe we should talk about that too. Just because for those of you that are from the south, we take a whole bunch of lanes and all of a sudden we shove them into 2. And it's a kind of a bad road anyway.
Right.
We've had some fatalities there. So widening it would mean all of this would have to slow down all of a sudden and violate red lights and things like that. So I question that.
Would you, well, let's, before, okay, let's keep that on the board too, and then let's come back to the issues. So, widen Route 29 might be something you want to look at in the next level of screening. It's partially funded in the 6-year plan. That particular project to move forward now needs some more money because it won't have the bypass and wouldn't work as planned.
Actually, I think
With
we
the bypass.
had that in our road improvement plan, regardless of the bypass.
Right.
In fact, I believe,
Okay.
I was told that the cobble of money that went over to the bypass included the money, some money that was allocated for that project. So it's been a long-term part of
Right.
our plan to get that choke point. Why-
Yeah, we are not suggesting that any projects come out of the 6-year improvement program.
And I'm not saying that
Yeah,
either. Kristen just
okay.
brought up a good point that the numbers at the bottom are a tally of how many N's and Y's you have or not. And that may have changed the grade.
But that's an ungraded one.
Right.
So, because it's assumed that it's gonna happen. I
Yes,
mean, that's my assumption, that we're
Yes.
gonna ride 29, which would be great.
All right, so that's a given too, along with the synchronized lights. So
Yes.
we don't really even need to have it on this.
we really don't, and that's why we put the note on. We put the note on because we talked about it, because it's partially funded in the 6-year plan. It does need some additional money to make it work. And depending on what solution we would move forward, it may affect how that project, how the northern part of that project ties into a solution. In a large sense, that particular solution is something that's going to happen absent the CTV making some decision for another reason.
So could it be the desire of this group to potentially recommend to the CTV that funding be moved into the near future rather than however long they have planned?
It could be.
Otherwise?
It could be.
That clarifies.
Sure, it could be.
Hey, Bill, is this a direct statement?
As funded does not include bypass
Not being in effect.
not being in effect. It does need additional money to address. Yeah, as funded needs additional, that's,
And
you're
actually,
not
from the
there.
perspective of the MPO, that project didn't change from before the bypass to when we had the bypass.
It did not.
So the way it's designed was originally designed for not having a bypass, so it should be pretty much what it is. Some of these other changes may affect
Yes.
it, but the bypass, it would have been the same either way there,
Yes.
the intersection at the top.
One thing I did want to add, Philip, is that widened Route 29 project is actually pretty much included in the 3, they're rated as 3, to move, it's a part of each one of those.
Right. Well, let's note that. We'll note that differently.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what's given in those.
Right.
So, can I ask further, so was that the 50 to 100 million then? Is the 50 to 100 million of the widening of Route 29 north of the river is included in the 250 to 350 million?
No.
And it's a slight nuance because of the 6-year improvement program, the status of it, the difference now is only 18 million.
Here's what I'm thinking about Route 29, listening to this conversation. Let's get it out of here. Okay, Route 29, that widened Route 29 project, to work now, needs an allocation of about $18 million to make it happen. It works with all of these 3. So it seems to me like the Route 29 project is more of a near-term issue for the Secretary and Commissioner to address with the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And when we make our recommendation to the CTB, we can note that fact. We can note it more as a fact in terms of how it relates to one of these solutions. Does that make more, that seems to make more sense now. For some reason it didn't yesterday, but
And don't we in fact need to note it as more than facts because it needs $18 million more dollars? So doesn't that have to be 18 out of our 200?
and I don't know if it does or doesn't.
Otherwise, it's not.
It may.
18 is a 250 to 300, so that's included in that.
In here. Do we want to talk about the 3s? Okay.
Especially if we're including parallel road low build as one of the 3s.
Let's include that as one of the 3s. We can do this a couple ways. Here's what I'm thinking. Why don't we let Ben, and Ben, maybe you can kind of come over here a little bit, if you feel good with that. Take us through each column as it's presented here. So we'll go through throughway low, high, parallel, low, high. How's that?
starting with the median throughway low build concept, which is second column. Really, we considered a range because when we heard from the panel originally, we heard express lanes. It could be a light version of express lanes, could be a heavy version of express lanes, could be separated. It could be you just assign the median most lanes as for through traffic. And how do you do that from a different perspective? So we gave you a range. That's why we went from low and we went to high. The low is essentially going through and eliminating left turn movements at specific intersections along the corridor. It's keeping the left turns, though, at some of the major intersections along the corridor. Predominantly, that's Hydraulic, Greenbrier, Rio, I believe Branchlands was one of them, and Hilton Heights. But for the remainder of the corridor, the other 10 or so stoplights, we were eliminating left turns and incorporating some access management principles, doing things like quadrant intersections, where you essentially have to go around the block to make a left turn. And that's going north-south on 29, you would not be able to make a left, and going on the cross streets, you wouldn't have to be able to make a left. So it involved getting some improvements off of the corridors, so some of these side streets and back streets, so you can actually make those movements. So that's where some of the costs came from. This is actually, the low build includes everything that is in the 6-year improvement program that's partially funded, except for Berkmar Drive Extended, which we added and incorporated into this.
So that's in here.
That is in here. That is in the low build. So your Hillsdale Drive Extended, your Best Buy ramp improvement, your widening of 29 north of the river is included, and Berkmar Drive Extended is included.
So if the parallel roads low build, which is Hillsdale and Berkmar basically, comes to $200 million, how does it get incorporated in something that costs $100 million?
Well, remember, it's partially funded already in the program, so we were taking that into account.
But you have on the median
It's not
throughway,
fully funded in what's already.
No, it's not. It
Yeah.
requires additional funding, but
Is
it's,
that in there?
yes, we've taken into account the funding that's already.
Berkmar all the way from like Stonefield to the river, or past the river to Target?
That was a $50 million improvement.
Can you repeat that? I just really want that to sink in. So we're looking at something that says medium throughway low build, but it actually incorporates several other projects.
It does. It assumes basically the 6-year improvement program projects are in place and you're adding Berkmar Drive Extended.
And Hillsdale,
Yes.
and Hillsdale. And, thank you. It's not
it just doesn't seem possible.
No.
That you would be $50 million as your low end estimate for that.
I'm sorry. Misspoke completely. Parallel roads low build incorporates
Yes.
everything. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I totally got confused.
So
I
combined,
apologize.
Okay.
it's doable with the two things happening.
Yes.
Okay.
Those left turn things don't really work if you don't have parallel
Exactly,
roads.
strike that, I'm sorry. The median throughway low build concept, I apologize, is just basically eliminating the left turns and
Okay.
doing the quadrant intersections. Parallel low build is what's in the program with Berkmar Drive included. I apologize for that, it's my fault. The median throughway high build concept is, again, it depends on the details, but in terms of a range, but it improves interchanges or intersections with Hydraulic and Rio, where we essentially go through a grade separation. And it's a very simple interchange. It's not your, people envision a cloverleaf interchange, but it's basically taking advantage of the terrain and doing what we call cut and cover. You basically, at the hilltops of Hydraulic and Rio, you're cutting through and you have a 4-lane typical section for the through traffic, and you're bridging over top of it. On the outside, you have 2 lanes for local traffic. And it's staying largely within the right of way. So that's the high build alternative for the expressway.
Do you have a picture of that? Or
Not yet. We wanted to wait and get feedback from the panel before we got into doing it.
Christina?
Can I ask a quick question? These ones that say, limited right-of-way acquisition required, are the estimates of getting those right-of-ways included in these amounts? Or is that just an unknown, and so they're not included?
Right now, it's a little bit of an unknown.
Yeah, it is an
Is
unknown.
there an estimate included or nothing?
We have
It
some
would-
estimates included, but
It's off.
It's really unknown. I mean, that's a difficult nut to crack in the time that we have. So those are considerations that are going to have to be taken into account moving forward.
One other quick thing about the right-of-way acquisition in terms of our time frame, and we're supposed to be looking at getting something accomplished within 2 to 4 years, correct?
Substantially underway.
Okay.
And that can mean a lot of different things.
One of my concerns about right-of-way acquisition is the unknown and how long it could take to
Sure.
fight that out potentially, and also a huge effect on businesses. So the unknown costs, these are just all things to keep in mind because they're
Yeah, these are, but we have some very good directions to work with in terms of how these move forward and how they might fall out as concepts that would ultimately need to be designed that are going to help take some of that into consideration as well. In other words, we're not going to make a recommendation for a solution that works great for traffic and wipes out the 29 corridor.
Yeah, I mean, because some of these estimates, are above our price range already, $250 to $350 million, and if that's not including right-of-way acquisition, Lord knows, how high we could end up.
That's right.
And that's part of the estimate. The reason you got that variance is that there was some consideration for right-of-way in that estimate, and not knowing what it's going to be, you got the big variance in that number. Right. We could come close with construction costs because we do that all the time. It's that unknown that you just talked about that created that big variance in the estimate.
But how does that one get a yes for implementable within budget and time? When its lowest possible cost is $250, and it sounds like it's going to be, that's.
Because as I said earlier, my judgment, and in the panel's judgment, but I'll be accountable for this, that solution seems to offer substantial benefits that make sense for mobility, and it's scalable. It doesn't all have to be done at one time. And one thing I heard loud and clear from the Commonwealth Transportation Board on March 17th is that it's great that you're doing this panel, but we want to, and it's good that you have this chart, but we're also expecting you to bring back a pretty good slug of information here. That project could move forward in a way that could be limited to a budget that only gets you so far in a certain period of time, but still provide benefits that make sense as far as mobility in the 29 corridor.
It seems though that that's sort of, breaking the rules that we set for ourselves, which was trying to get it done within a 2 to 4 year range under a certain amount of money, and then to say, well, because we like this one, it doesn't have to follow those rules.
Well, I'm not saying that. We might get to another level of screening, and maybe that would fall out. To drop it out now could have done one of two things and said, well, you said 250. I don't think it'd be that much. I think this is more like 150 to 300. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play with those numbers. But I am going to exercise a little judgment to say I see something that from the technical team's view offers some substantial benefits, and at this point to discard it from consideration for another level of screening, I think would be a mistake. And
I'd want to know what parts are going through, because to have the whole package as something that goes through would be, if the whole package isn't going to get done, then it's sort of a chicken.
well, what we're not going to do is end up where we've ended up for 30 years. That's not going to happen.
That's what I'm worried about.
So well, I'm a little less worried about that. We may take something to the CTB that says, you know what? Here's a package of things that, from the point of view of improving through traffic in the Route 29 corridor in Charlottesville without messing up and hopefully making better local traffic, are a sensible package of projects. They cost $460 million. And of those, here is a piece you can do that can be substantially underway in the next 4 years and under $200 million. But as a transportation body responsible for the management and leadership of mobility in the Commonwealth, it comes with this package, and you ought to be thinking about this package when you make your decisions. That's kind of the way I see it. Maybe and you ought to be thinking about rail, and you ought to be thinking about park and ride and these other things. And you maybe need to do a study on Route 29. I don't know, but that's why those are on there.
Not get to the parallel roads high build option. And I wanted to,
Are we clear on the median, on the expressway median, high or low and high, whatever?
parallel roads high build option actually includes everything that's in the low build option, which is what I started with before. The 6-year improvement program, I'm sorry, all these projects are swimming in my head, I'm sorry so much. But the 6-year improvement program projects plus Berkmar Drive extended. The difference with a high build option is that we, again, look at the intersections of hydraulic and Rio, and basically doing the same type of very simple separation where it's a cut and cover and you bridge over the intersection, taking advantage of the terrain. It also incorporates either express bus or BRT. And this is very similar to some of the recommendations that came from Places 29, the package of recommendations that came out. We looked closely at that study and took into account the recommendations that came forward. They had, actually in Places 29, I think, dedicated one of the lanes on the current Route 29 alignment to BRT service. So it can accommodate either express or BRT, but that's an option.
Well, wait, I need to just clarify that. So the difference between the parallel roads low build and parallel roads high build is that we've included a cut and cover at hydraulic, and that's the only difference.
No, it's more than that. It's at hydraulic, Rio, and then you had improvements at the 29-250 interchange, and on the northern end, eventually you would have Airport Road as well.
So that we're overpasses is cut and cover.
That's to maintain the connection for local traffic, right, Ben?
Correct.
With the overpasses that there are, two of the different options, is it at each corner of the intersections that you're saying that these would be at, there would potentially be, property affected? Or is it, I don't really know exactly what it looks like, so I'm
Yeah, we're going to
trying to understand that.
If these advance, we're going to be working on developing some renderings for the panel so that they'll have an idea.
Some very simple renderings so we don't get lost in the details of pictures. We are not going to know everything that each one of these options affect or require, because we're not designing anything here. What we are doing is, with the best information available, coming up with some concepts that can move forward. If they do move forward, the first part of that would be more efforts on preliminary engineering, for lack of a better word. That stuff you do before you can build something. And I would fully expect that no matter how something, the simplest thing, will run into a few surprises that will require some back and forth. Projects will have to go through compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act. VDOT will advertise for and hold public meetings and public hearings. I mean, so all of those same things still have to happen. But hopefully the result of it will be the construction of something that makes things better than they are today for through traffic without disrupting local traffic. It's the game plan. So if we took these, and we'll forget these notes for a moment, and kind of put the Wyden 29 project off to the side for a minute, meaning that it's being carried forward. Would the desire of the panel be that throughway, low, high, parallel, low, high, go to a detailed, a next level of screening along with the development of some, I'm going to say, rudimentary sketches that would help frame the view of those a bit? Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I'm still back a step.
Yes, go ahead, please.
There was one of the other kind of scorings that I was just wondering about how it was arrived at. On the median throughway high build, it says that the solution minimizes impacts to the environment, community, and businesses. And I'm not quite sure that that's intentional.
The concept,
It includes the grade separated interchanges and all the stuff that, I mean, there's...
well, I think what we're thinking of grade separated interchanges is an intersection. The word interchange is really not what's included here. What's included is for the median through high build, are the addition of express lanes in the median that in some cases would be lower than the elevation of the local roads, and the local roads would be connected across the top. It's an intersection, not an
But
interchange.
there would have to be ramps and things connecting those.
When you're in the expressway, you are in the expressway. You're not getting out.
But the people who are trying to get across the other way.
People who are trying to get across, drive over a road, across the top of the expressway. If you,
From hydraulic, you couldn't get on 29
you could get on the local road,
by a ramp.
get on the local road like you do today.
There'd be a red light.
It seems that
Whatever there is today, whatever there is today. These are building express lanes in the median that once you're in them, let's say at 250, you're not getting out or in. They're express lanes. They're express lanes servicing through traffic.
I'm just wondering how you would build that without a really kind of strong impact on the environment and the businesses around there.
Carefully in the median. Sure.
Yeah.
That's not new. I mean, this type of construction is not new.
Oh, it's not new.
It's able to be
I'm
done.
just wondering about the why in that particular square.
Because it's, for the large part, it's mostly contained within the existing right-of-way.
Is that,
Is that-
also it's relative to the mobility benefit. That's the key to that statement.
I think what we're finding here is that there's no formulas that y'all use to be weighted. And
That we don't see.
that goes beyond what we can see here. And so-
Yeah, go
so-
ahead.
So
but-
maybe these grades don't really matter. because what we're really looking at is you want us to select some things to look at on the 24th. Is that
That's a good way of looking at it. There are really no secret magic waiting behind here. There are some there aren't. There's some objective, some things objectively that you can measure. There's a lot of professional judgment from experience, but the point of it all is, just as Ms. Ditmar said, is really, regardless of whether you change an N to a Y or a Y to an N, which I'll be the first to admit, I bet there's probably not one Y or N. I didn't say, well, why is that a Y? Well, couldn't that be an N? Well, of course it could be. It just depends on how you look at it, but to the extent that we try to look at it relative to the charge, that group of N's and Y's produce these results. And what I think our objective today is, and that's why I said earlier, you were going to see some scoring here. I'm here to tell you, what I think is important is that as a group, if we can, as a group, have some agreement on what goes forward to the next level. Personally, I don't think it should be all 9, but we're not dealing with 900, we're not dealing with 90, so we've got our arms around something here that's manageable. And if it's not 3, but it's 4 or 5, then let's see where it takes us. Herm?
Just looking at the data and looking at what's presented, if we base the assumption that the 6-year plan is funding some of these projects, 29 widening as well as the parallel road low build, and let's move forward with the ones that have not been studied yet, so we get a good understanding of what they are. I think it's pretty clear, and I like the work.
The only problem with that, I think, is they're not funded to be able to move forward to a large extent. So if considering them solutions, we're going to need money toward that.
But you have a plan. We don't even have a plan for the other stuff. So we put that plan aside and come up with a plan, big picture concepts of the selected ones, and then we can compare and see how they
Keep them on
fit
the
together.
list, but just don't get off the plan.
They've been studied in great detail. They're designed, I believe. Is that so? But they know what the plan is. We just don't know the plan on the rest of it.
If we're looking at what we're going to look at going forward in terms of our recommendation, I mean, it seems to me obvious that the low build should be looked at, and then in conjunction with the high build to see the difference and really how things break down. You know, if we're going to recommend something that costs $200 million, I guess we need to know within the high build how it breaks up. Well, what could we get done now? You know, what are those different price breakdowns? Personally, I like the 2 low build options much better because I think there are a lot less unknowns because they have been so studied. Those right-of-way acquisitions and the 2 high build give me a lot of concern. So I would not,
You're not alone in
I would not
in
take
that.
those 2 out.
We won't get into all that discussion, but you're not alone. It's a legitimate question there.
I can say that solutions you have, those 4 we're talking about, are mostly dealing with through traffic. 85% is local traffic, and we are spending most of the money you're talking about here going to the through part, not the local traffic. My worry is that it will affect our businesses and maybe more harm than good.
Well, I hear that concern. And that's something that we certainly want to look at in the next level. But we've got to look at, to meet our charge, we've got to look at improving through traffic with doing little to no harm to local traffic and hopefully reducing congestion for local traffic. So I appreciate the concern, and we've got our eye on that ball.
And I think, as Mr. Hinch pointed out, not only on local traffic, but local businesses, because this is one of
Sure.
the core economic generators of both Albemarle County and Charlottesville.
No, there's no question. No question.
So It reminds me about this grading again. If we can discount it now and pick 3 or 4 of these or however many we decide, these rankings aren't going to go to the CTV because if they are, we should probably talk about them. If they're not, then we can just discard them and options.
Unless I hear differently, I have no intention of going to the CTV with, here's this box, got an N, and here's why.
Okay.
I don't believe I don't want to presume, but I see a concurrence from Ms. DeTong that
Okay.
she could care about the why or the yes. This was a method, an honest, good faith method with a lot of debate and edgy moments, right, Ben? Some edgy moments that helped us get here. The importance of today is getting from here to the 24th. Realizing that, yes, we're going to look at improving mobility for through traffic, but yes, there are big considerations in this corridor to take place with respect, or to considerations with respect to not just local traffic, but local business. So if we looked at low, high, realizing that parallel roads low is partially included in the 6-year program, and looked at that from the point of view of what's already been studied and funded, and the additional amount that it would take to build out this alternative, and took those 4 options through a more detailed level of screening that looked at performance a little closer, right? We want to see how are we, can we put a Y or an N in a box? How are we improving mobility? What does that mean for through traffic? What's that mean for local traffic? We start looking now at some of the environmental issues or social, economic, and environmental constraints that we would get a sharper edge on these 4. Does that make?
Would you include the cost of those things, like parking ride or bus?
I'm envisioning that we take this cost estimate, Mayor, and maybe split it, not too much, but just a little bit more that says, here's a part for construction, this amount might be applicable to bus, this amount might be applicable to a couple of categories, but not too many. What I'm a little cognizant of is I don't think we don't want to make the mistake of pretending to be more precise than we can be.
They're not designed.
At this point in time. Yes, Ms. Akins.
One thing I'd like evaluated, though, as we do that, is one of the concerns that we have is that we do have people who race across 29 now. It's very hard to get across at the intersections, already, and so people are crossing midway and
Race, leg race.
Yes.
Okay, I got
With
you.
strollers and
Sure.
children and
Okay.
and bicycles, and so we know, because we have especially a lot of low-income housing along this corridor, people who don't have cars, who are going to be trying to get to work or home or shopping on foot or on bike. We have to have some assurance that within the budgets for these is included safety for pedestrians. and
It's
bikers.
included in our,
But
I hear
The
you.
evaluation, I want to see, is it doing that effectively and how? Not designed, but real specific, kind of conceptually.
A real specific concept.
Exactly. And I know,
We can do that.
I don't want us to say, oh yeah, sure, it'll be fine.
No, I understand. I hear you.
But how are you going to do that if you have an express lane right in the middle?
That's my question.
Well, the median high bill would handle that.
Yeah.
Median high bill would just be all over that.
We'll show you. We need to give you some comfort. I hear that. Hopefully the comfort is enough that easy on the antacid, but it may be a little tough. Look, we are cramming years of work into a short amount of time. But I'll also tell you this, almost everything we do takes 20 times longer than it needs to. It's because, in my judgment, over the last 40-some years, we frequently don't do this. We don't sit in a room, gives ourselves a pretty hard charge, do our business in front of 3 people in England who chose to watch for some reason. Hello, England. And you can do a lot when you put your mind to it in a short amount of time, but you can't pretend that it's everything. So when we do go to the CTD, we're probably going to have to say something like, in the time we had available, within these parameters, this is what we were able to do. Here's a package of projects that makes sense. Here's what they cost. Here's what you can do within 4 years and $200 million. And by gosh, here's some things you're going to want to look out for along the way. So I think we can kind of set the course, shove the boat out into the water with a strong sense of commitment and get to a good place.
One more thing. Can we add, and I don't think it's a terribly large expense, but just as a piece, the concept of overpasses for pedestrians that are ADA compliant?
Add the concept of,
Because, I mean, you were mentioning that a high build
Let's-
would do it, but you don't necessarily need a whole highway structure to get pedestrians across. And so,
the answer is yes, we can do that and look at that and let us talk about that in the team, see where they, yes.
I know what we're trying to do is get to this. Can I clarify one thing?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure we talked about the Best Buy ramp, and does everyone not on here know what we're talking about? Okay. You?
Not really. I just know the Best Buy ramp that connects 250
Yeah.
to 29, US 29, but how does it work?
Well, I probably the least capable. answer.
Ben, do you want-
The
you
changing
wanna-
the whole dynamic of it to make it flow better onto 250.
The project is
Why don't you stand up and do that, sir?
It's an interim improvement that was recommended in the late, Florida study that was done along here. But essentially, the ramp is being dual laned. It's a single lane now.
So the same sharp right hand,
Yes.
15 miles an hour.
And it also includes an extension of a lane, a turn lane essentially up towards hydraulic. North. So, I mean, when you're heading southbound, there would be an additional lane to get onto the ramp, and then once you got on the ramp, it would be
a longer acceleration range.
Is that good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I brought it up because my understanding is it's supposed to greatly improve that little choke area there. Is that completely funded? Is that ready to go?
There's $1 million.
No, it's one of the ones in our fact packet that says it needs another.
So is that one of the ones we can put over with the widening and the synchronization, or do we need to?
It needs to be funded,
Right.
so it would fall into our budget,
This one? Okay.
right?
Yeah, Philip, that project was initially funded, and it included revenue sharing dollars in it.
But then when it switched over to VDOT control, those revenue sharing dollars were taken out, or at least verbally.
So it's not funded.
It's not funded now.
It's not funded, so to be part of a package, it's going to count toward our budget, right? Is that correct? Not correct.
Well, it's in either the low build or the high build throughway concept, you have to have a connection between 250 and US 29. So it's got to be incorporated in that, whether it's exactly the ramp project is detailed, but you have to connect the two.
I think we're going to need more information because our friends from other places need to see what that is. Because it's not, I assume it's not in this.
It's incorporated in the low,
It's in some.
parallel low build option.
Parallel
Right.
low build.
That's it.
But don't you how do you connect
There's
the
no
old
reason.
bypass 29 from 64 to 250? How do you tie that into the through build concept? You have to have a connection there.
I'm not following. Could you, sorry.
As you're coming north, coming north from the south side of Charlottesville, and you're on what I call the old bypass, which is the first bypass that was built on the eastern side of, or excuse me, western side of Charlottesville. That then turns into 250, or I guess it still is 250. But that interchange has to be improved by either a high build or a low build throughway concept. You have to. You have to transition the traffic somehow.
It's
Right.
the improvement to that interchange is included in the high build.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Which may not be the ramp concept. It may be a whole new way.
And it's actually, the median low build, I'm a little unclear about how you get out of the median and cross 5 lanes of traffic to get over to get up onto that ramp.
It's not necessarily a separated lane.
Right.
It's just prohibiting left turns at a lot of the intersections along the major intersections.
You'd have already moved over by then.
Yeah, it's like it is today, except you just can't take the left turn at a lot of the intersections that are lighted. They're
Okay,
single.
the median, because median low build, I want to make sure I'm understanding this correct. I had the same question, but the median low build doesn't include an express lane. It just eliminates the turns. So it doesn't have a designated separate lane.
It just kind of through traffic management, devotes those inside lanes to more of a through
It's a
move.
little more smooth.
So just for clarification again, the medium throughway low build doesn't include the fully funding of the Best Buy.
The median throughway low build does not include
So-
full funding.
Not to project, what if that's one of the ones we want the CTV to look at? Wouldn't want to not have a fully funded Best Buy.
Then we
Because I think it's just a component of a bigger solution. So if I think we need to put forth to the CTV the bigger solution, which I think a ramp, the Best Buy ramp is designed now, or something similar to that, would by necessity have to be a component of it.
Right, so we actually don't want to lose that in the mix of.
Yeah, we don't, and we're going to have more opportunity here. I mean, we're not going to leave here and not come back and talk about these again. What I think we should do for the next level, Kristen. No, go ahead.
If it wouldn't be useful to have a list of the things that we know we want funded. So the completion of those 6-year transportation projects that are already in the hopper would be something we know we want funded. All of us probably already agree that that's something that it's in most of these things, and that's just an assumed, when you were talking about kind of what the assumed things are.
What I think we're thinking the same thing. What I'm thinking for our next level of screening are I'm trying to envision what this next matrix looks like without anything in the boxes. And I think for these solutions, we have the broad solution, and under there, we have the components, the bus, the pedestrian, and project XYZ that's already funded in the 6-year improvement plan. So that we see funds, we see projects and money that's already programmed where it's applicable to a particular alternative. We see the total cost and we know what the delta is. Because the delta's got to come out of our budget,
That doesn't.
okay?
But does it? Because I guess I heard you say something slightly differently, because some of the projects that are in the 6-year plan aren't necessarily in one of these bundles.
Oh, that's true.
So they wouldn't show up as a subset. I thought you were saying, take what's in the 6-year plan and put all those aside regardless of looking at these bundles. Because some of them are not subsets of these bundles.
It's true, there is a whole separate set, but they're not necessarily getting additional funding from this.
Well,
Projects that are in the,
every one of them needs additional money.
Well, one of them is the Belmont Bridge, but that's not going to help this project.
I'm not talking about Belmont Bridge.
Okay.
I'm talking about all the ones that are in this list as being in the 6-year plan. It was in our fact pack.
Yes,
Every one of those,
that have to do with 29.
the Best Buy,
Yeah,
Hillsdale,
well, that's what I'm saying, that's,
right?
but he was saying you would identify those as subcomponents of particular packages. Some of those are not subcomponents of particular packages.
not yet.
So if you want to be sure that those are funded regardless of what we do, I think we need a separate box that says these are the ones that are already in the 6-year plan, we've already agreed upon they need, according to the fact thing, they need 42.67 million more to finish all of those. So in some ways, that's where I thought you were going, there should be a separate box for that. Can we all agree that we want to proceed with those projects?
I think that'd be a hard thing for all of us to agree on.
Okay.
I guess I see that a little different than our
Yeah, I
chart.
must say-
I mean, where they apply to these solutions, I see it.
Well, Best Buy.
So for
rates
example,
us.
if you built a high throughway, you would not necessarily build, I would argue that you should have as part of it, but a Hillsdale connector. So if we want, and maybe we don't all agree on this, I thought that there was some level of agreement at our last meeting that some of those parallel roads we needed regardless.
Anyway.
If we don't have that agreement, then we don't have that agreement. I thought that we
Traffic on
did.
Well, in my perspective, it's the local problem versus regional and state problem.
The regional problem is congestion on this road, and you can't get rid of that congestion without the
Which is the low build and high build parallel roads up,
Yes.
which would mitigate congestion on the roads, which would improve through traffic through 29, which would be beneficial.
But you don't support those if we're doing the high. So that's, do you understand the?
There's some issues listed on the 6-year plan that really don't impact us at all, like widen to 6 lanes from I-64 to Barracks Road. I mean, that's not gonna,
That's not in the 6-year.
it's on the table as part of it. But if that's there, or it's out there in the off years. But we just need to be careful when we're looking at this, whether or not it is beneficial
Yeah.
long-term for through traffic, which is improving congestion, improving mobility, pulling local traffic off of that. You're basically building a grid system on traffic, which is a good planning measure. It's good. But we just, as long as there's a demonstrated improvement and it's going to pull traffic away and not just a pipe dream.
But if those
Well,
are fully funded and you say we're looking at the median throughfare high build, you spent all the money on that with no money left for those
Right.
parallel roads.
That's where I'm
They
going.
won't get built.
Well, I thought there was an agreement.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case. The 6-year, the Commonwealth Transportation Board is managing a bigger piece of revenue for broader issues than our particular charge. I don't see our charge as saying, do what we're suggesting, don't do this over here. I don't believe. The Commonwealth Transportation Board may say, well, gee, you brought us a package, looks like it totals about $400 million over so many years, may make decisions on other projects about whether they're funded or not, but I want to be careful, and I hear what everybody's saying, I want to be careful of mixing responsibilities here. I think our responsibility is pretty darn narrow. Our charge is pretty narrow. Your responsibilities are much broader because particularly for the elected people, well, all of you have much broader responsibilities. But our charge is fairly narrow. Some of these 6-year improvement program projects relate directly to our charge, and I think that where they do, we ought to pull it out, and you ought to know how much money is already there. Because I believe we should make the argument that the money that's already there doesn't count against our $200 million.
And just to be clear, I agree with that too. I thought though, I was trying to actually move our common ground further. I thought we had agreement that those 5 projects were beneficial and should be funded. That's all. That's where I was trying to go. And that's what Kristen was going was to actually expand our level of agreement before we model all these different things and pick solutions. If there were these 5 that we all agreed were beneficial, that would be part of our recommendation. I was trying to get us quicker to
I don't
agreement.
think that there'll be,
But if there's not agreement yet, then there's not agreement.
I don't think those 5 projects have 29 success factors. Congestion reduced, mobility is increased, when you have parallel roads completed. And I think we ought to be part of the, any project.
I think there's a way to express our opinion about those projects. They're obviously have already gone through some sort of process, right? To get to the 6-year program where the Commonwealth Transportation Board has approved them and allocated money to them. Some of them, they require some additional funding
And if
to
they're
be
not,
fully
and
funded.
if we're not all on the page yet, I'm fine with having them proceed with these packages. I just thought that if we all agreed on that much, we could have that as step one of common agreement. That's all. 'Cause I thought I had heard from previous comments that everyone agreed, but maybe they don't. And if not, then we should keep them in these packages.
And one thing to keep in mind, I appreciate your comment about additional funds could potentially be available, because if you will remember, this was a $250 million bypass project, $50 million that's been wasted. $50 million would go a long way to last your 6-year plan. And it would be nice if there's a way to reclaim those funds that have already been spent somehow.
If you reclaim those funds without dealing with local traffic, local congestion, and that is one very good for us, I think.
If they funded your 6-year plan, then that would be very good for Charleston.
I was just, just to point out one thing to keep in mind is we keep harping on this, 85% is local traffic, and some of the solutions that have been brought forward are these, side roads like Hillsdale and Berkmar, which technically aren't on 29. But if 85% of traffic is local, then getting those people off 29 will help through traffic necessarily. And we always say, oh, there's money in the budget for that, but this 42 million, that's a lot of money, and things happen. And I think getting those local people off 29 would help through traffic so much. And I mean, I'm a through traffic driver, so I know, what that would mean, but getting people on Hillsdale and getting people on Berkmar, which I would take if I was going locally instead of 29, will help necessarily through traffic and, congestion. And I do think for any of these solutions, it's really important that that gets done.
And I would agree with you. I think there is. I just like to quantify that before I can support it.
Yeah, and I also wondered in terms of some of these have suggestion that there would be U-turns. So if you didn't make a left, you would just make a U. That seems slightly dangerous to me as well. And exactly where those U-turns would be, I just don't want to create problems trying to fix problems. So anyway, understanding where those U-turns would be helpful.
Okay,
That's going to be all part of our visual presentation.
that'll be part of the next.
I
next
agree
meeting.
with Turner, the beautiful thing about us seeing what each of these elements will do to improve may particularly help all of you that aren't from here understand. I started realizing that if I had gone to Lynchburg for this exercise and you said, well, Joseph's Road extended, I wouldn't know what the heck you were talking about. So we'll have a map the next time, and you can see how these, what I would call, if you get rid of the word extended and you get rid of the word parkway, these are like little bypasses. Well, as I think you were trying to say, we're flipping, we're giving the same solution, but flipping what kind of traffic we're taking off. The bypass, Western Bypass took through traffic. These little roads will take our local traffic, so freeing up a great deal of asphalt for through traffic.
And this map almost did it. I could almost figure it out. There's little red lines that connect it.
We will. Trip?
So when you were saying we would study 4 going forward, widen Route 39, we're bracketing that, right?
We're bracketing that.
And what about the passenger? I don't want to lose that.
Well, no, let's go back to that first sheet. Let's further develop that a bit in terms of anticipated draw from
And cost.
cost.
Yeah.
Cost.
Because I think we can park the freight rail part, because I think that's what drove the
Right.
consumption of money and time. So I think that one is probably outside our scope. think passenger.
Yeah, we won't lose it.
Although recommendation for it is within our scope, but you're right.
Just found out how fast $200 million
We'll-
Seemed like a lot of money when we started.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money.
So we gotta narrow it down by.
So look, these four. Bring information back. We'll look these four. 4.25. And we'll look at, for each one, we'll have a picture. We have a map. We'll have some pictures.
Do we have any modeling for what the flow, how the flow might be affected?
I hope we'll have some, but there again, I know what they hear when you say model, and the answer to that is we won't have that. But we'll have some high level, I mean, we're not going to come in here and say there's going to be 12,308 cars are going to go here.
So
But we'll have some general idea of pluses and minuses and where it's going. Now, we'll just say this and then move past it. Remember, every time you take something away from a congested corridor like this, there's somebody waiting to get in it. But that's a bit of a different story. Fred?
If you're gonna do any level of modeling prediction, it would seem to me to be most helpful to some of us to have the modeling reflect what some of these local projects would impact.
My guess is that, and I'm going to have Ben say yes to this, whatever I say, is that these local projects are in your model because they're part of the model from the MPO. Yeah. So absolutely. Start over. For each one of these, we're going to have a map. We're going to have one or more pictures that show some key elements of each one. Might be an intersection, it might be a pedestrian treatment. We probably won't have a picture of everything you want, but we'll do our best. So we'll have that for each one. We'll also have a description for each one that breaks it out just a smidge in terms of these things that we've said are common, and wherever a current 6-year improvement program project fits in one of those four, we'll have it in a way that you can see what it is, you can see what the current allocations are, you can see whether or not there are any future allocations required to make that particular project work, and we can see the delta from our budget. How's that?
I think that sounds very reasonable. I've got a question, maybe one more to add to that. On the high build and low build through concepts, I'm having trouble visualizing the length that you would go when I'm looking at the full corridor. Is that just through the Ravenna River, or is that northward all the way to the airport? If you could just show.
We'll show you that length, and we'll show you how far you can get for around 200 million.
Perfect. Because the reason I'm bringing that up is we've talked about the 85%. That's right. That's exactly right. But it's on how big is your window? Are you looking at the whole corridor? Or, because if you look at the corridor traffic fact sheet, you'll see the traffic counts are tremendous between Springfield and 250.
And when you get to either end, as you get to the extremities of that corridor, that through number goes up. But I'm asking everyone's indulgence because there are a lot of opinions about how much a through traffic is. I'm comfortable, and I put Ben through a pretty good drill, I'm comfortable with the numbers that around 15%. And as you get to the ends, that goes up to 30, 40%. And to argue in between, it's kind of like the yeses and nos on the chart. Where I came to was, you know what? I don't really care, because our charge is to improve through traffic in the 29th quarter without disrupting, and hopefully improving local traffic. The number is the number.
Right, and I thought that's why the traffic
Yeah.
count was so interesting.
It was.
Well, and your crash chart backs up what
Oh,
you
wow.
said.
Yeah,
And
sure
you haven't
does.
even touched on
Yeah.
the safety,
Yeah, right.
You know, that right
Right.
there says it all.
Can I ask one question about the maps? Is there
Absolutely.
any way that the areas that they assume right-of-ways might need to be acquired could be highlighted in some way, so we know where those are?
If I could just say to that, I'm going to ask that we not do that for one particular reason. It requires a level of judgment that we're not prepared to make, and it will therefore be conservative, and therefore it will worry a whole lot of folks who would probably never need to be worried. I'm not diminishing the importance of doing it. I personally think now's the wrong time to try to make that judgment.
But, I'm just thinking about this, what Kristen and Kristen said, and that is, right away is going to impact businesses. And if one of our indicators is impact on business, don't we need to kind of know that?
Let's look at the information we have. Let's look at the information that we're going to have. Let's look at the maps. Let's look at the concepts. And let's see what questions that leaves us with as it relates to right-of-way. Because for VDOT to do their job in good faith, if we were trying to make that estimate now, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see a big blob around every interchange, and you're going to see a big old corridor around 29. I already know what that's going to look like. And what you would say is, well, geez, this really doesn't help us with that issue. And the answer would be no, it won't help. We're just not there. It's very important. We might be able to put a little sharper edge on it when we see what these folks come up with for these particular drawings and some of these concepts and some typical sections. Some of you all are maybe more familiar with that term than others. In other words, if we were to go out there with a saw and start on the west side of 29 and just cut the pavement up all the way to the east side and then look at it, that's a typical section. So you'll be able to see, well, here's what the road looks like now. Here's how a median high-low build might look. That'll help you a little bit with this right-of-way issue. You're still going to have questions, but we might be able to put a little finer edge on them.
Philip, and just to add that, we're going to be doing everything we can with any project to bring the right of way in. So again, the road has 12-foot lanes out there today. It may be that in order to reduce it, you go to 11-foot lanes. Well, you just picked up 8 foot of area that you can use for other improvements. So until we actually get into the engineering part of it, Philip's correct. We don't even want to get into guessing because we don't want to give people the wrong opinions when we just don't know the answer right now.
Just a specific question about the ones that involve the median.
Yes.
And the price estimate. I know there are a lot of utilities under the median.
Yes?
And is removing them and doing all that part of the cost estimate?
To the best of our ability to think about what that might be.
Just
yes.
seems mind-boggling that.
We actually drew numbers out of a hat. But this one over here, no, it's there. Again, and I know I'm being redundant, to want to work real hard and not let the information we're presenting you get ahead of our ability to predict.
And I know
Yes,
that's
that's
a real
being
number.
thought of. If you saw the spreadsheet that Chuck used to come up with these broad-based numbers, you'd see a whole lot of detail that at the moment, the best we can do is say, we're thinking about that, and here's a mark.
And when might we see these maps? Will we see them at the meeting or before it?
I'm going to talk to Ben afterwards, and let's see, to the extent that I can get you information before, I'm going to. I'm absolutely going to. That, every day I get it to you means a day less that Ben has to work on it, so I want to balance that out a little bit as well. So it may come in some pieces again, too. We'll talk about how to manage that, because I do want to get you stuff ahead of time as much as possible. This matrix, quite frankly, to be honest, I could have sent it to you last night. I just decided it wasn't a thing to do, that we needed to have this conversation here the way we did.
Wish list for information.
Yes.
So that everybody here can look at that Best Buy ramp and see what that
Yes.
means. And then there was one, the John Warner Parkway will be opening, and I'd like everyone to see how another way of taking traffic off helps, even though it's not in the scope of this. I think it'd be really good to see that one too.
Is that something we can do?
In mind.
Okay.
The MPO.
Okay. All right. So everybody's feeling a little bit uneasy about something.
I'll say about right.
Yeah, let's do that right. All right, so we're pretty cool on what we're going to do for those four, throughway, low, high, or where we call them, 1 and 2, parallel roads. We're going to bracket 29, the widen 29 project. We'll cut in the 6-year improvement program projects where they belong, and we'll have some information on rail.
in terms
And pedestrian.
And the express bus and pedestrian. Yes, yes. Once you look at the clock.
What do we do for 10 minutes?
It cost us more money if we go longer than 2 hours. So we're saving, which we can go longer than 2 hours. But,
For the highway.
we can, yeah, money we're saving, we can give to Clinton to hold for us. Hey, look, let's go just with a little wrap up like we did last time. Any final thoughts? Ed?
Well, I think my comment about how far 200 million is going to go when you're retrofitting roads now, everybody needs to understand that. And, Charlottesville, when a lot of this work happens, because I think it's going to happen, I think everybody's kind of funneling down, hopefully. They're going to have to learn really what the word patience is, because there's going to be a lot of inconveniences and the route that we're going here, but I think the next meeting in the pictures say, tell 1,000 words. I mean, I think that's going to put everything in perspective, and that's really going to help narrow things down to get ready for the CPB meeting. And your comment on things, we're not building the roads now. That's up to you guys at a later date. We're just trying to get the model right and use the money in the wisest manner to get the throughput. And that's what we got to focus on, is the throughput. And there are a lot of things that aren't going to happen just because you don't have the money. It's about moving the traffic, and that's what we got to keep the focus on.
Okay. Mayor?
I agree with him that we want to improve the traffic. At the same time, we don't want to kill the whole area in the process.
Christina?
I think, keeping in mind that we're trying to increase mobility and safety on 29, and that, getting local traffic off, which is people turning and, causing probably the accidents anyway, off the road would be very helpful, so.
Hal?
I agree with that. I mean, I see what Turner is saying. Our main charge is to get through, that we can get some of that local traffic off from these little bypasses. Talk about that would be helpful.
Jane?
I think we're still in the analysis stage. I feel pretty good about the information coming forward. Since there's an underlying direction, it's up to us to look at for alternatives. We can play that.
Right. Jim, thanks for joining us today. Any thoughts?
I look forward to the bundling of the options so we can make some sense out of this.
Okay.
We don't have any room to complain about traffic in Culpeper, as what I've heard this afternoon.
Mayor Coleman encouraged us to keep it simple, so tell him that we're doing our best with a lot of complex stuff. Christina?
Well, I've
Or
certainly,
Kristen, I'm sorry.
taken plenty of floor time, but, you know, I'm pleased with the process, you know, I am feeling a little nervous, a little anxious about, you know, some of the possibilities.
Sure.
But that's because we're the ones right in the epicenter of all this, and, you know, when we look at what the impact will be, there's a certain amount of impact for Lynchburg because people come through here, but a lot fewer people come through here than live here. And so we really want to make sure it's livable.
Fred?
I think the 3 or 4 of the solutions that are moving forward certainly impact through traffic, but they also have a tremendous impact on local traffic by the efficiency they provide, less left turns or no left turns. And although that the 2 expressway lanes may be considered a benefit that is not local, the fact of the matter is the whole package does benefit local through more efficient traffic.
Thank you. Tripp?
So look forward to seeing further analysis. I mean, I think we've got a number of good ideas on the table. I think that a number of these, from at least all the modeling that I've seen over the years, it benefits local and through traffic. And so I think we're going to hopefully come up with a package that will effectively do both. I think there are some hard questions in here.
Yeah.
But I see elements that I think do fit together to a nice package.
Okay. Turner?
I'm very encouraged about what I've seen so far, and I'm pleased with the results of from the technical team, what they brought forward. Charlottesville is and will continue to be a destination for shopping, for tourist attractions, for university. I know my wife tells me all the time that she can't find anything to wear in Lynchburg, so she has to go to Charlottesville. I think it's an excuse to go hit everything she can possibly do while she's in Charlottesville. I've got employees that live and work in the Charlottesville area. We, on a corporate basis, we very much are part of this community, and we understand the community's concern. You know, we've got planners on our staff that are involved in this and share a lot of the concerns that you have. I appreciate this group being concentrating and understanding what it takes to improve the traffic. I can concentrate on through traffic, but I do recognize the fact that if you reduce the local congestion, it will improve through traffic. Let's just quantify it, and I know that the team can do that, and I think this can move forward very nicely. Thank you.
Mr. Tom, anything you care to say?
I think I'll go to England.
Someone is there now. Listen, this is hard work. This is hard work. The thought I left with the last time was, boy, did we ever get the 10 right people around the table. And I really mean that. I look forward to the 24th, and I will get you as much information as possible beforehand. If you have any question or any concern, you've got my number and an email. Please use it as often as you care to. Thanks. Be careful going home, and thank you all for coming out.
And the 24th?
The 24th, here at 1 o'clock.
Everybody needs a shuttle bus to get back to their cars.